Okay, welcome everyone. I'd like to call this meeting of the Wilfrid Laurier Union Students Board of Directors this Wednesday, November 3rd, 2021. I'd like to acknowledge that our offices are located on the traditional territory of the neutral Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, and people. For regrets, I just received one from Director May, and then Director Both will be joining us shortly. So with that being said, can I get a motion to adopt the agenda as presented? Motioned by Director Vale, seconded by, we have seconded Director Shanduk. Would you like to speak to your motion? Any discussion on the matter? As I see none, all those in favor, Director Shanduk,
I approve.
Director Daljudice,
I approve.
Director May. Oh, sorry, apologies. Director McCarthy,
I approve.
Director Symington,
I approve.
Director Vale,
I approve.
and Vice Chair Sneedy.
I approve.
The motion passes with unanimous consent. Next, moving on, do we have any conflicts of interest to declare today? As I see none, we can move on to our first agenda discussion, which is the US bank account presentation. So I'll pass it off to Chris Turner to introduce this to the board.
Hi, everybody. Good evening. This one, I don't think should take too much time, but it is something that I've wanted to do for a little while here. So I'm glad it's made its way to the agenda tonight. Basically, you have the information in your package, so I won't go through it line by line. But what I'm looking for is, as my report says, there are a number of times each year where I have to get a US draft to pay someone. And that's typically a lot of the musical performances that we bring on campus, even if they're Canadian acts, tend to have US representation. And therefore we have to pay them in US funds. Some of the software that we use, we have to pay in US funds. Some of the equipment that we've purchased in the past, we've had to pay in US funds. So I think I estimated anywhere between $30,000 to $60,000 a year that I have to pay in US. So what I would like to do, and so I'm not asking for us to find additional money. What I'm asking is to take money that's sitting in our Canadian main account right now, convert it to US funds and start up a US account so that when I have to create or go to the bank to get these drafts, we'll use this account to create them. And then we're not at the mercy of the exchange rate on that particular day that I go to the bank and have to get the draft created. Right now, because we don't have the US account, it all depends on the exchange rate on that particular day. And sometimes it can be good, sometimes not so good. But I think just by creating this situation with the US account over time, if we contribute to it regularly, it'll smooth out those fluctuations. And by no means do I think is this going to save us a ton of money every year, but I would estimate a few $1,000s if we went that way. It's pretty simple to set up too. Anyway, I'll leave it at that if there are any questions.
Thank you so much for that briefing, Chris. Opening up the questions, I see we have one by Director Vale.
Through you, Mr. Chair, to the Director of Finance. I guess just a quick question. So I'm just like, first off, I fully support this idea. I think it's a smart idea and probably just more efficient, I imagine, for yourself and the other staff in terms of probably being able to do e-transfers and stuff through this US account potentially and whatnot. But I imagine, would there be any fees for like a US bank account as well, like that we would incur or maybe like that sort of would be offset as well by presumably like there's a fee for bank drafts as well? Not that they're a lot of money, but just more curious.
Yeah, so there would be fees associated with this account. And I've seen the rough numbers, and it's not a lot more than we would already be incurring in our Canadian accounts. So I don't foresee there being a lot of additional costs that way, other than we would have one more account that we are paying fees on. But I would say to that overwhelmingly, I think the savings that we would incur from not being, as I've said before, at the mercy of the exchange rate on the day I do the transaction, I think that would outweigh any additional costs from the service fees. So I don't know that that would be a factor in our decision whether we went ahead with this or not.
Does that answer your question, Director Vale?
Yeah, no, it does. And I think the dollar cost averaging, I think that's a smart idea to do. And then because given, especially over the past couple of years, sort of the fluctuations, like, I mean, even in my own work with, I know with a number of clients, like there's significant variances just based on the exchange rate for a given month. So I think it's a smart idea and probably more efficient, hopefully, for staff too.
And one other point, if at some point, I don't know if many of you remember, but a number of years ago in the last, I don't know, 7-8 years, the Canadian dollar was actually at par and for a brief period of time was worth more than the US dollar. That situation were to ever come up again, having a US count would be a good idea, in that we could actually look with a future board at saying, hey, we should buy some American dollars now and really pump up that bank account. So that's another opportunity if that situation were to ever occur again.
Okay, excellent. And is there any other questions from any other directors? I just had a quick question. I'm just gonna ask my quick question first. So, and then I'll give it to you on the speakers list, Director Vale. So the Students Union, if I'm correct, already does business with RBC. So this is not too much of a, operational, logistical challenge just to set another bank account with them, correct?
Yeah, so our bank is the Royal Bank, same as the university. And I've already had discussions with them on if you guys go ahead and approve this, about setting it up. So it is quite straightforward.
Okay, excellent. Passing the speaker list down back to you, Director Vale.
Actually, maybe just a quick question. I was going to move the motion, but I guess just a quick question. I imagine in order to open the bank account, I don't know, do you need like the official minutes from this meeting, like the motion authorizing it? To go ahead and do that?
I don't believe I need that. I would need, I believe, another signing officer other than myself, who would be either PJ or Brooke Abbott, to go with me probably at the time that we set it up to sign the documentation. But I think that would be it, unless, I don't know, Ian, if there's anything that you think would require board minutes, but I don't believe there is.
Okay, no, that's right. Because I guess where I was going to go is if we needed that, then maybe I was just going to suggest to the chair that meetings could be perhaps prioritized, just given that there were there's backlog from May or June or whatever. I think that they're starting to work through, and given the situation with the secretary. And I guess with that, Mr. Chair, if I may, I'll go ahead and move the motion that the Student Union open a U.S. bank account and essentially proceed with that recommendation. You're muted.
Perfect. We have a mover. Do we have a seconder? Director Symington, would you like to speak to your motion? Any discussion on the matter? As I see none, we can go. All those in favor, Director Bothwell?
I approve.
Thank you. Director Shando?
I approve.
Director Del Giudice?
I approve.
Director McCarthy?
I approve.
Director Symington?
I approve.
Director Vale?
I approve.
And Vice Chair Sneedy?
I approve.
The motion passes unanimous consent. So I'm sure that our Director of Finance, Turner, will give us updates on when that process is completed, right? And if necessary to have the minutes as Director Vale specified as proof, we can for sure put that in terms of a list of priorities. With that being said, we can move on now to our comments to the chair and board. Some quick updates. So in terms of the election, by election, so we are still have yet to reach quorum. We are exactly 45 votes away. So I'm hoping that we can have a big push this week and then announce to the candidates the results of that. Oops. I will give me a brief second to fix this.
Darkness, my old friend.
Oh, darkness, my old friend. Well, okay, with that being said, some additional updates. So and I believe I was in conversation with the executive director Champagne in regards to Angela King from Brantford to help us with the minutes, and I believe that she's agreed. So we can begin sending her the minutes, and then we will, I believe, provide proper compensations given the like a proportion of work that she does to the secretary. And the as for my final point of updates, the ad hoc hiring committee has met and is the process of choosing a board secretary for the remainder of term 2 as well. So the rest of the board will get additional updates based on the results of that decision. Does anyone have any other questions for myself as chair and CGO? Any questions at all? As there are none, I can pass it off to comments of the president and CEO. So I believe I'll pass it off to Bill.
Hey, unfortunately, President Jamiloff is not able to join us today. She had a family emergency that took her away from the office. So our thoughts are with her and her family at this time, and hope that she's back with us sooner rather than later. I don't really have anything to add from a presidential lens, but if there are questions that we can direct towards the president, I may be able to answer those or have them answered in due course.
Okay, thank you. Opening up the questions, I suppose, for the president through the executive director Champagne. Any questions at all? If there are none, then I suppose we can move on to the comments of the executive director. So there you go, Phil, you got the floor again.
Yeah, probably should have just knocked them both out at the same time, but not a ton to update beyond what was submitted as part of the board package. There are some ongoing discussions with regards to some of the partnerships with the university. Obviously, we're going to be talking about the student life levy a little bit later. There have been some developments in that over the last couple of days. The Fred Nichols Campus Center second floor project continues to be ongoing, but we are looking forward to very slowly bringing that across the finish line, but not a ton to update at this time. We met, myself, PJ, and JS Ballascanthan from the Director of Hospitality Services, met with our partners in Aramark and the university, as well as I believe they're the Waterloo Leadership Council, which formerly known as the Waterloo Residents Council, which I believe is comprised of mostly House Council presidents in residence in Waterloo, to talk about food service in Waterloo and get feedback and answer questions and kind of introduce them to the players that can help kind of customize and make their food experience in first year the best that it possibly can be. It's a meeting that we've been doing every year for probably about the last 5 or 6 years, and maybe a little bit longer, and is something that we follow up in second semester with direct kind of feedback solicitation to find out what their experience in the Fresh Food Company and Wilf's and the Terrace Food Court has been, which obviously this year is a little bit more unique than most, so it'll be really interesting to hear what they have to say. Other than that, Bob is your uncle, in my case, literally.
Hey, access some really exciting updates in that regard of student life. Opening up the floor to questions for the executive director. Any questions at all? I have myself 2 questions. First of all, could you speak a little bit more to point number 7 under policy research and advocacy?
That's just me firmly planting my tongue in cheek to let Ian know that we didn't miss him that much, but we are sure that he's back.
No, I think at the beginning, I definitely expressed my deep excitement that he's back among the ranks with us. Um, so a big welcome on myself behalf of the board. And I guess,
Thank you for putting that on the record, Andrew. I appreciate that.
of course, I mean, like, too bad he missed out on all the fun in September and October, though.
Indeed.
The second question I have, and this is a different actually matter entirely, because I believe we had discussion about updating the board governance budget last meeting, and that we tabled that to have a conversation. So I want to ask if there's any updates, since we have also our director of finance, Chris Turner, here. Was there any further updates on that to help the board supplement the additional cost of the by-election?
So Chris and I spoke briefly this afternoon at our 101, and the plan that he had in place won't actually be feasible. That's not to say that we can't find the money. It's just a matter of the original plan won't work. So he is still here. Chris, did we ever, I can't remember, did we come to a conclusion on that?
Andrew, you're looking for about $3,500, somewhere in that range.
Yes, and that is,
Um,
yeah, specifically to cover for the record, just the cost of the voting system, the honorariums for DRO and CRO, and as well as the reimbursements for our wonderful directors for helping us like spend money to help garner votes.
So what I would suggest at this point as a source of funds, as Phil mentioned, that our original solution didn't work. We set a very large maintenance budget aside each year for operations that we typically, I don't think there's been a year since I've been here that we've ever spent that whole budget. A lot of the money we put aside in it is for contingency on the maintenance side, but we could easily find $3,500 or whatever it is you end up needing out of that budget to cover the costs for the election. So I don't see that as being a problem at all.
Chris and I can work tomorrow and formalize exactly where that money comes from and kind of put that in a brief for the board for the meeting on the 17th, if you prefer.
So that'll be perfect, and I think that will actually coincide really well with hopefully we have the CRO hired by then. I know that the posting has just gone up live this week, so thank you for those updates on that fact. Opening up the board again for any additional questions regarding these discussion points or anything else for wonderful executive director. As I see none, then I'd like to thank Executive Director Champagne for his updates, and we can move on to our next point of discussion. So back at the Executive Director for the over 10K expenditure discussion specific to the FNCC first floor fire alarm system.
Yeah, so I asked Chris to stay for this just because this has a big part to do with him as well. But over the course, in between lockdowns, I can't 100% remember when, there was a period of time where the fire alarm system was going off on a daily basis, sometimes multiple times a day on the first floor of the Fred Nichols Campus Center. As with a building of our age, the infrastructure kind of needs to be updated and upgraded. And so facilities asset management hired a third-party contractor to come in and investigate the matter that was setting off the fire alarms. They came up with a patchwork solution to get it to stop, but ultimately have a pretty significant project proposal to put forward to replace the system, which is something that we need to do because the fire suppression system is pretty important where all things insurance and operations are concerned. And as per our operating procedures agreement with the university, it would fall under the split, which is defined under the operations side, which is a 77-23 split. So it's I want to say just north of a $300,000 project, and the amount that we would be required to put towards that project would be $270,000. Typically, we would kind of pay that off in installments over the course of a couple of years because that's a pretty significant expenditure, but we happen to be in a pretty good financial position at the moment. So the request is to the board to be able to make that in a lump sum payment.
Okay,
Chris,
thank you. assuming silences that you've covered everything, Executive Director. So I guess we can go back and bring this discussion up for the board. Yes, Director Vale.
Yeah, no, I think this is something that obviously it needs to be done. I think there's significant risk if we don't have a fire alarm system that's appropriately working in terms of the risk of the organization, in terms of like insurance, as the executive director pointed out. But and just at the end of the day, I mean, we want to make sure our assets in the facility are, if there is a fire or something that, and I believe, and there, I believe, and I don't quote me this, but I believe there's also laws regarding sort of having a fire alarm system working order as well. So I think this is a fairly straightforward thing. I think I'll just go ahead and move the motion that we approve the over 10K expenditure.
Okay, so we have a mover. We have a seconder. Vice Chair Sneedy, would you like to speak to your motion? Any discussion on the matter? As I see none, then we have all those in favor. Yes, Director Bothwell.
I'm just wondering what the annual like cost of like the insurance is. Like obviously we need to replace the fire alarm system.
Okay, so Executive Director. would
So
you like to speak?
sorry, just to make sure I understand the question and that Chris is paying attention. You want to know how much it costs us to pay for insurance every year?
I meant to operate the fire alarm system. Sorry, my brain is not working.
Okay, now I'm a bit lost.
I
Sorry.
think it's the annual cost. Like after, like, is this? I'm assuming is it just a one-time payment for the
This is
project as
just,
specified?
it's basically like a piece of equipment. We're paying to have the old equipment removed and new equipment put in.
Okay, so it's not going to be like we have to pay more cost every year. Okay,
That's correct.
I just have to make that work. Okay, that's my only question.
And just in case anyone is, and our insurance costs us about 80 to 85,000 a year between liability insurance and property insurance and everything that we end up insuring. So.
Okay, perfect. I'm just curious, just as a, for point on the record. So after we purchase this system, right? So you're requesting for specifically the 270,000, right?
Yep.
Okay, and I'm assuming that the maintenance cost for the system would just come out of the normal operating budget, post completion, correct?
Correct.
Okay. So I guess we can go back. Would anyone, is there any other further discussion on the matter? As I see none, then all those in favor, Director Bothwell,
I approve.
Director Shando,
I approve.
Director Del Giudice,
I approve.
Director McCarthy,
I approve.
Director Symington,
I approve.
Director Vale,
I approve.
and Vice Chair Sneedy.
I approve.
The motion passes with unanimous consent. So we can move on to our next discussion. So that would be the SLL Waterloo referendum discussion. So I know I am supposed to introduce it, but I believe that the executive director will have much more to speak about this.
So this is a brief that doesn't necessarily require the board to make a decision. Obviously, last year during the remote elections, the student life levy failed at referendum. And so this is an operational recommendation to ask the question again. So basically, it's just to have a discussion with the board because there is some debate as to whether or not what the fee value should be. So the fee value as of last year was proposed to continue where it had been previously established. So it was $9.77, I believe, per half credit to a maximum of 4 half credits. And so in the operations and president's group discussion, they believe that if we were to ask the student life levy question in Waterloo again, that it should come in at a reduced value. Their thinking was anywhere between $6 to $8 per half credit. And that is ultimately the primary purpose of the discussion. I don't think it needs to be a particularly long discussion, but one that I thought the board would want to weigh in on.
Okay. Excellent. So I guess, again, opening up the board for discussion. Yes, Director Vale.
And this is more of a maybe historical question, but I guess I'm just wondering in terms of the disparity between the two different, like the Brantford fee that's assessed versus say the predecessor, like that being the 977 or whatever it was, and then the inflation, like why there was sort of that differential between say Brantford and Waterloo, like kind of how that came about historically maybe, or
No problem. Just don't quote me on the years here, but a number of years ago, the question went to the students of Brantford to establish a fee at par with the Waterloo fee. That referendum failed, but enough student leaders thought the question was worth asking again. And a few years after that question had failed, they took it back to the student population, but very similarly reduced the value of the fee in an effort to make it more attractive to students to help enhance the student life experience on Brantford campus. So it was literally just to try to get the vote to pass.
okay, no, that definitely helps. And I think probably in all honesty, probably the lower end of the like the $6 in all honesty probably would have a better, I don't know, just my thought of potentially passing, probably the lower, especially if students are going to sort of be seeing that sort of differential and be like, well, why am I paying more than Brantford kind of thing too.
Yep.
Okay, excellent. Director Symington, I saw that your hand was up earlier. Do you still want to ask a question?
I think so. I'm not 100% sure if the nature of my question makes all that much sense, but if so, let's say we'll pick $7 just to like as a happy medium for my hypothetical because it's right in between 6 and 8. If it was $7 per person, what would that like grand total look like in terms of money to play with?
Well, that would depend on course load, right? So it would be $7 per half credit to a maximum of 4. So let's play it out to $28 a semester per student, and then multiply it out by undergraduate population on Waterloo campus. Number of which off the top of my head, I want to say is about 13,000, 12,000, something like that. Just the Waterloo campus, Brandon. So it's not quite that high. So it ends up being probably south of $500,000 a term.
Gotcha.
But that fee has also helped establish things like Alumni Field, not in its current form, in its previous life. The turret renovations into the student space, the student lounge projects, lower concourse, computer lounges all around campus, murals, things of that nature. It's a very valuable fee that has helped enhance things for a number of years on campus, and a lot of good work has been done.
Could I ask a follow-up?
Yes, you can.
So with respect to student life levy multi-campus, where does that kind of fit in the picture here?
So that committee was established as a result of both campuses having a fee and then agreeing in principle that if there were multi-campus projects that truly enhanced the life of students on both campuses, projects would go to the multi-campus committee and then be divided depending on what the project was. So if it was an asset project, so for example, like the tech share program that the UDesk offers, then it would be divided up by whatever number of assets went to Waterloo versus Brantford. So for argument's sake, we get 10 computers and 3 go to Brantford and 7 go to Waterloo. Then the Waterloo fund pays for 7, the Brantford fund pays for 3. Whereas if it was more of a general thing that didn't have specific assets dealt with it, it would be divided up by the student populations, which it's been a minute since I've done that math, but I want to say is about 81.5% to 18.5% or something to that effect. Please don't quote me on those numbers because they're probably not 100% accurate, but yeah, that's ultimately the purpose of the multi-campus. And now that there isn't multi-campus fees, it's only on Brantford, the multi-campus version of the student life levy simply does not exist.
Gotcha. Very well put, Phil.
I have a question. So if the board were to like follow a recommendation to lower the fund, then it's what was at the previous referendum question. Would there be a risk of like, unable to fund certain projects? If that makes sense.
No, because right now the Waterloo Fund is netting out at zero because it failed. So we closed that account for all intents and purposes. So if it goes to referendum and it is established, it starts brand new. So there's no projects committed to it. It starts off at whatever X value is, and away we go.
Okay. Yes, Director Vale.
And just a quick question, it's been probably quite a while since I've probably kind of forgotten probably, but does the university also contribute funds to, like, is there sort of some matching? Okay, it's just solely what we get from here. Okay. Thank you.
I guess to answer. Oh,
On the record, because there's no minutes for me shaking my head, the answer to your question is no. Sorry about that.
But I know that in principle, when projects do go, based on my experience on the SLL, if there's a project that benefits both kind of like student life and the university, usually the expenses of the project are shared.
If it will enhance the space for the institution and enhance the reputation of the institution, typically the student voice would like the institution to have skin in the game. Yes.
So hopefully that answers your question, Director Vale.
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Okay. Is there any other further discussion on this matter here?
A question from in the chat.
Oh, how often does a referendum need to be posed? It's annually. So or is it not annually?
No. So the previous referendum question was asked because the agreement with the university was expiring. So it depends on the length of the agreement that gets struck. So the previous installation, I want to say, was a 10-year agreement, and it had expired. So we went back to referendum. The question that we asked last year had no expiry date, so that the fee would be continuing and become legacy.
Okay. So if we were to then have this question up for them, which I think is the hope of the entire board, without being too presumptuous, then would there be a expiry date on such a question?
The intention would be to ask the question in a similar fashion to last year, but if that's something that the board would prefer to see, the question hasn't been crafted yet, so happy to take that feedback.
I guess we can kind of ask, how does the board feel about this particular consideration? Do we want to keep it at the original value of the 9.77 or adjust that, or or do you want to like propose a question at the lower amount? Yes, Director Vale.
I think I kind of already mentioned this, but I think probably the lower amount, and I think it's something perhaps we put back on the referendum. I mean, the worst case scenario is it doesn't pass, but I think it's maybe worth another shot. And I think potentially the other aspect is, and I mean, I'm sure I don't think we'll get into this meeting, but I think potentially we could be looking at maybe an in-person election. Who knows what's going to happen with that? So there might be more opportunities to kind of sort of showcase some of the projects themselves potentially on campus as well, or some connections again to what's been done. But who knows?
Okay.
Can I ask
Oh, yes, Director Bothwell.
Okay, so my input is that I think the lower amount, like people were scared with the high amount last year and didn't really understand what the student life levy was. So it's better we get some money than no money at all. But also, I guess my question is, like, if we have like an open-ended question and say we set the rate at like $6 or $7, do we have the opportunity to increase the fee without asking the question again?
I believe no, but
so the answer to that would depend on how the question is phrased. So last year it included the inflationary title of the consumer price index, which increases the fee by whatever that's set at. Historically, that's been in and around 2% every year. But if you wanted to make a jump beyond that percentage, you would have to go back to referendum.
So let's say if we start off with 6 and then we want to increase it back to what was originally set up amount, then that would require another referendum.
Correct.
Okay. I
Okay.
did like the way the question was last year. I just think people weren't really like aware of what it, like, obviously it was hard because everything was online. So I'm in favor of lowering the fees and keeping the same question.
Okay, perfect. Director Symington.
Yeah, so I personally I'm like a big fan of Student Life Lovely. I really enjoyed my time on the SLL, Waterloo, and multi-campus committees. I also think it's like a really good idea just because you do run into a lot of students kind of not really knowing what Students Union does, and this kind of gives them an avenue where Students Union can literally do whatever like they want them to do, given it gets through the adjudication process. Um, so I do like the idea of the phrasing of the question, kind of pointing it in the direction of it being a legacy thing. Um, also, if I'm looking at it from like, I don't know, like a casual student perspective, I think, if I see something that's like between like $9 or $6, I honestly don't think I'd think that much into it, as long as it's kind of below 10, because like 10 is kind of that like eye-catching value where you get to double digits. So I personally, I don't, and like I hope I'm not being too ambitious, because I do want to see student life levy return. But honestly, I don't think it needs to be reduced to like the extent of $6. That's my personal opinion, and like obviously there are very valid points to disagree with that, but I did just want to voice that.
Thank you, Director Symington. Moving on, speakers list, Director Del Duce.
Yeah. I would advocate for lowering the student life levy to about $6, mainly because, talking to students last year, they were a bit scared about it being such like a high price according to them. So I think in order to get at least some headway into getting it back, I think it should be reduced to $6.
Okay, thank you, Director Del Duce. Director Shando.
I have a question. Can you make it like 10, 12 bucks and not mention the price on the vote?
No, we cannot. We have to, because believe that would be illegal, first of all, right? And the point of having it is because this is directly affecting at least the financial aspect of the ownership.
And can we do something to raise awareness about this? Because I read the question, I had no clue what it does.
Mhm.
So how about we set up a fund to explain people? Let's see, we spend 10, 20,000 and in return we make $500,000 on that.
That is a great question, which the executive director will be able to answer.
Yeah, I actually think, if I remember the agenda, because I don't have it right in front of me, but I believe that's an excellent segue into the next topic about the stewardship program. So to answer your question, Director Chantok, the answer is absolutely. One of the challenges that we had last year in the remote environment was championing all the value that the student life levy brought to campus. Everything seems to be pointing, he knocks on wood very carefully, to be a far more in-person experience in January in the winter. So there'll be lots more opportunity to show the value that the student life levy brings. In general, the Development and Alumni Relations Department of the university, which is the administrator of the student life levy for us, so they're the ones who take care of all the I's and T's and all that. They want to become better stewards of that program, to make students aware of projects that were impacted by the student life levy. Some of the ones that I mentioned are the bigger ticket items, and how do they do a better job kind of letting students know where their dollars are actually going. So 100% the answer to your question is yes, we can all do a better job.
For additional clarification, myself and the executive director and the president were in, I believe the president was in the conversation.
I
can't
believe
recall.
she was supposed to be, but couldn't make it because of, I want to say General Assembly, but don't quote me on that.
Oh, I believe it was USA, I think. But we had a meeting with other representatives of the institution to talk about stewardship, and as a summary, like how do we do a proper job of conveying the value, the dollar value, to be honest, to students. And I guess that's a good segue into our next conversation. So I believe I don't think a decision is required for this discussion. I think it's just the general consensus of the board is that we are agreeing, at least majority, that if the question were rephrased with a lower fee, that we're all in support of that. So moving on to the stewardship discussion. So we did have a discussion about how do we get students to be aware of the value of the students union, the student life levy. Currently speaking, most of the projects that are listed are just either on the website or there's specific signs around campus. But the problem is that those, I think, quote unquote, in our discussion, act more like museum pieces than actual, like, telling students about the value of it. A further discussion will be warranted, and I believe that we want to include one of the members on the Brantford SLL, since that's the only SLL that's still functioning at the current moment in that discussion. So we have two members of that, Director May, as well as Vice Chair Sanidi. And I believe that we would like one of them to come into our next meeting. My apologies.
Timer.
With that being said, since Director May is not available, I believe is the recommendation to have Vice Chair Sanidi to come on into those discussions. But before we get into that, I see that we have a question, Director Vale.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I don't know if we addressed or you noticed the question that was posed in the chat from Nicholas.
Oh, my apologies. Thank you for informing me that. I don't know the question on the top of my head. I believe that is in the elections policy. But I want to say the answer is no for now.
I believe the answer is also no. I'm sure Dr. Muller will weigh in. But I do know that, for example, last year, one of the things that we tried to do was get the candidates to be aware of those referendum questions and to support them if they believe in them. Obviously, if they didn't believe in them, we wouldn't be upset if they were opposed to it. But try to get the candidates to see the value. As for active board members, I think that their primary role during that 2+ week period is the same as candidates during the voting day period, which is simply to encourage people to participate and vote.
But I believe that there was nothing wrong with telling people what the question is about and then allowing those, our ownership to make the decisions along that. And I want to say the answer is no, because there could be other referendum questions, such as whether or not to continue KPMG as our auditors, for example, right? And obviously, if a board member happens to have some financial connections to that, either because their parents or they themselves work for KPMG, that would be a gross conflict of interest there too as well, right? So, okay, perfect to answer that question. So thank you, Director Vale, for bringing that up to chat. So, going back to our original discussion, Executive Director Champagne, is there any other further things that the board needs to discuss within this discussion regarding the stewardship?
So we just need to pick somebody.
Yeah, that's
to come with us to the meetings with direct development alumni relations.
Yeah,
so I think as you mentioned, it should be somebody actively on that committee. And yeah, I will leave it at that.
Okay, perfect. Just want to make sure. So can I get a motion to table? Oh, sorry. Yes, Director Vale.
I was just gonna make a motion to appoint
Okay.
Vice Chair Sneedy to that said committee,
Okay, motion.
assuming he's content with being on it.
I suppose the question should
Which he is, so yes.
Okay, he does stand. Excellent. Okay, motion by Director Vale, seconded by. We have a seconder. Director Symington, would you like to speak to your motion? Any discussion on the matter? As I see none, all those in favor, Director Bothwell? Director Bothwell? Okay, we'll come back to
If
her.
she's on the phone, she may not be able to
I-
answer quickly. Oh, there she
Sorry.
is.
Oh. Do you approve?
Sorry.
Or,
True.
okay, excellent. Director Shando,
I approve.
Director Del Giudice,
I approve.
Director McCarthy,
I approve.
Director Symington,
I approve.
Director Vale,
I approve.
and Vice Chair Sneedy.
I abstain.
Motion passes 6-0 to 1. Next, we will be discussing a governance review ad hoc committee. So I'll pass it on to presenter, Director Vale.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So one of the things I thought might be a good idea, and I think given the fact that we sort of have a new secretary coming on board, was sort of to look at ways of maybe how we can streamline sort of existing governance practices. So the structure of our agendas, for instance, or our minutes and stuff, and kind of look at what makes sense from an efficiency standpoint while ensuring transparency, and also suits the needs, for our auditors and the operational staff and stuff and others who may be relying on our minutes, or not. And this isn't necessarily just limited to minutes, but for instance, how do we maybe vote during meetings? Do we need to take a voice vote for every single, like approving the consent agenda or stuff like that? Like more, how can we do things more efficiently potentially?
Okay. I think that is an excellent discussion. And I guess obviously Executive Director Champagne would like to weigh in on this. So I'll open the speakers list with him first.
I actually more so just have a clarification question, because the governance review is actually a process that the board does on a cycle. But this doesn't sound like a governance review. It sounds like a procedural review. Am I right in that assumption?
Yeah, so I sort of drafted a bit of a briefing out here. I haven't had time, but the title was just in the agenda that Andrew kind of wasn't quite the exact one, but it's more board governance practices review ad hoc committee. So really more the practices, like operationally as a board, and how we do things. How can we do things maybe more efficiently that save time for all involved, reduce workload while ensuring we're meeting the needs and obligations of all sort of parties. But sort of in a nutshell, like kind of thinking and finding ways whether we certain policies to amend. And I think that this is something probably that realistically could be sort of follow our sort of more urgent committees, like that being the not-for-profit one and the honorarium stuff, where potentially there could be aspects that could go to referendum, as I don't think really anything in this would need to go to referendum. So I think it's something we can kind of, and also kind of potentially involve the new secretary on as well, to kind of, if they're going to be doing the minutes potentially, or if that's one aspect. But the thinking was really to kind of bring different people to the table. So assuming the president would approve of it, like the obviously herself, but then assuming she'd approve of the executive director, potentially the director of research policy, research and advocacy, and then maybe such other operational resources as may be needed, since they're going to be probably the primary users potentially throughout the year of like our motions and stuff needing to go back and refer to. And then obviously maybe 3 to 4 directors, and then yourself, Mr. Chair, is the ex officio on this committee. And the whole idea is just, and then the intent would be for the board to, or this committee to sort of, discuss things, and really ultimately kind of prepare some recommendations and maybe come back to the board, and then we can discuss and decide what we want to implement, or if all, or if any, or what, and kind of go from there. That really just, I think, make things more efficient and just all around.
So are you suggesting that we strike an ad hoc committee to review like the
Yes.
board procedures?
Yeah,
Okay.
so board governance practices review ad hoc committee.
Mm-hmm. Just to make sure that we're not treading along other lines, would it be appropriate to call this as a governance, or would it be more like procedural? And that's a question either for the executive director or for the director of policy, advocacy, and research.
My
I think
personal,
the title that Brandon proposed fits well, so I don't see any issues with that.
Okay. So just want to make sure because I don't want to be treading along anything that's within our normal governance cycle. So could you please repeat what the committee ad hoc committee name
Sure.
was again?
So the board governance practices review ad hoc committee. And then the
Ad hoc.
proposed membership, when you're ready,
Mhm.
would be yourself as chair of the board, ex officio.
Yep.
3 to 4 directors. president and
Mhm.
CEO, the executive director, and then the director of policy research and advocacy, and then such other operational resources as may be deemed beneficial by the president and CEO.
Okay.
And the thinking was really because operations, we obviously as a board, we're not necessarily understand all the uses potentially they might have. So really, at the end of the day, we want to make sure what we're making changes that we're not going to make life difficult for others as well.
Okay, perfect. So motion that, do we have a seconder? Seconded by Director Del Giudice. Would you like to speak to your motion? Any discussion on the matter? As I see none, all those in favor, Director Bothwell,
I'm just wondering, are we like motioning to like make this committee, and then are we going to nominate people to the committee?
precisely,
Oh.
that is the idea.
Okay, I approve.
Okay, thank you. Director Shando,
Approve.
Director Del Giudice,
I approve.
Director McCarthy,
I approve.
Director Symington,
I approve.
Director Vale,
I approve.
and Vice Chair Sneedy.
I approve.
Passes with unanimous consent. Now we can open up the floor for nominations. So we're entering in a committee election. So I believe we said 3 to 4 directors. So the floor is open for nominations. If we exceed the 3 to 4, then I suppose we open into elections, but I doubt that anyone would like to have that. So yes, Director Symington,
I'd like to nominate Director Bothwell.
Director Bothwell, do you stand?
Yes, I do.
Okay. Director Symington, is your hand still up?
Nope, my bad.
Okay, no worries. Yes, Vice Chair Sneedy,
I'd like to nominate Director Vale.
Director Vale, do you stand?
Sure.
Okay, excellent. Any other nominations? Director Vale,
I nominate Director Symington.
Director Symington, do you stand?
I stand.
Any more nominations? We technically have room for one more. Yes, Director Vale,
I nominate, let me look at the list here. Director McCarthy.
Director McCarthy, do you stand?
Yes, I will.
Okay. Anyone else want to stand for such a committee? We can always have an election right now.
Don't do it.
Come on, guys. We can push this meeting past 1 hour. Let's go. But with that aside, if there's no one else to stand, then can I get a motion on the table for the acclamation of Director Bothwell, Director Vale, Director Symington, and Director McCarthy to the Board Governance Practices Review Ad Hoc Committee, motioned by Director Shandok, seconded by, do we have a seconder? Seconded by Director Del Giudice. Would you like to speak to your motion? Any discussion on the matter? All those in favor, Director Bothwell? I believe in this case, there's no foreseeable conflict of interest, so you can approve of yourself. This name.
But don't I just abstain? Or no?
Yes, you can abstain, but yes. Do you abstain or approve? I'm gonna mark that as an abstention. Director Shando.
I abstain too.
You don't need to abstain since you're not on the committee.
Yeah, no.
Oh, okay, so you still abstain?
Yeah.
Okay. Director Del Giudice,
I approve.
Director McCarthy,
I abstain.
Director Symington,
I approve.
yeah, Director Vale,
I approve.
and Vice Chair Sneedy.
I approve.
Motion passes 5-0 to 3. Okay, moving on to I guess, new business and announcements. So does anyone have any news, business, or announcements today?
I have a question, and that maybe one of you will know the answer to.
Sure, knock yourself out.
Why was the fourth year health sci course moved to online? I heard it was an operational decision.
Believe
an
that
in-person-
would. I believe that's more of a Senate question. I believe.
Does
I
any-
think. Sorry, Director Bill, you like to speak to this? I think.
I was just gonna say, yeah, no, I think I would tend to agree. It's more of a Senate thing. I mean, feel free to send, I guess, Senator Dang or Senator Vale or
Little other hats there.
on our other hats. And we can follow
Yeah.
up if needed.
Okay, I was just curious. I just wanted to know.
Yeah, so if there's any like issues regarding that, I would highly recommend sending that to one of us or any of the other undergraduate centers, and we can, if there is some sort of like, I guess, like problem there.
No, there's no,
Oh,
like
okay.
it was like university. I'm just sad
I
because I was
see.
in the class.
I see. Okay. So hopefully that answers your question. So it's not it's not an SU issue. Anything to do with classes is an academic senate problem. Also,
No, I know that. I just wanted to like heard.
Just curious, man.
yeah, there you go. And that goes for anyone else in the gallery too as well. If there's any other, like, if there's any issues regarding that. That being said, any other new business or announcements to make? I see none. I just want to say I'm very happy to see that we have some members of the gallery here today. So I'm really excited that you joined us today for purposes of our discussion. Do you have any questions that you'd like to ask the board too as well, or anything at all? Yes, Nicholas.
Yeah, just I mean, this is going to be, I mean, definitely something you've heard before, but I'm just wondering, what are the plans to kind of get some more votes? I know you're saying we're close, only about 40 away or so.
We're
But
exactly 45 away, and unfortunately today we only got 5 votes.
is
So
that including, like, I know you guys were speaking, or I've heard, speaking discussion about going on campus and actively getting votes. Has that happened over the last week or so?
that has happened last week. This week, it has been a bit lacking in terms of the results. So we're hoping that the board, for one, I guess, again, repeatedly, one last push, so we can just get it done by Friday. That is the plan. And it works out because then we can use the next 2 weeks before the next meeting to actually train the new directors, and they're actually well prepped for the role.
Okay.
Yeah. Director Shando?
Can't you just spam email all the students every single day till we get the 40 votes?
We have sent a lot of emails out, and we have
Can we do that on my space, the My Learning space? How
we've
about
already
that?
we've already sent out basically a advertisement on My Learning Space. The problem is that we can't just, as your question entailed, spam, because
I mean, I meant daily reminder, not the spam. My bad.
yeah, I've definitely already asked Megan to repeatedly send emails out via MailChimp. And those emails are only sent out to the people who on the system have not yet logged into a link. So unfortunately, we've, at least in terms of emails, we've already reached out to everyone who, I guess, who care
Do
about
we have
voting.
a phone? Do we have a phone bank of all the numbers of students?
I don't think so.
If yes, can we spam the emails? Like you can like send all of them a SMS or text message from a server.
No, we cannot do that. No, that's a gross.
There are spam laws, etc. So we definitely don't want to be doing any of that stuff.
Yeah, and we cannot access phone numbers because that's a gross breach of privacy.
But the university calls me often if they have any questions.
That's a different situation there, because that's for like a very, I guess, important situation, right? And we're different from the university. Remember, we're the students' union. Yeah. So I think the big thing, all we need is that if we get a push today, tomorrow, or on Friday, then we only need 45 more votes to reach quorum, and that's it. So I am sincerely asking everyone for the bill. I will be on campus tomorrow alone if need to be. So, but I'm sincerely asking everyone one last hurrah.
Yeah, I will vote tonight.
Okay, perfect. Please, again, send it to any other friends that you may have. If possible, I know we've already exhausted many options, but it doesn't hurt to just double check again and just double check if the people have actually sent it to vote. So, is there any other things? Yes, Director Vale.
Yeah, I just noticed in the chat, I believe Nicholas mentioned that there's an automatic reply saying join us on October 7th for results. It sounds like it looks to be after maybe the voting receipt.
Yes, yeah, I know that the automatic reply still says there because we just haven't fixed that there. But in the essence, the motion that the board approved last time is that the voting will just continue until the end of the term, until we reach quorum, and then candidates will be notified within the 24 hours to allow for proper logistics and planning of the scrutineers. Yeah, so as Executive Director Champagne said, yeah, boots on the ground is all we need to just get us 45 votes. That's it. We can take a look at that to make sure we can properly update the ICT service desk number.
The extension is no longer 2222. It's something else, but that's definitely wrong.
Okay, now the problem, we can ask them to fix that. Okay. Does that hopefully answer everyone's questions? Yes, Nicholas.
I'm sorry, I have one more thing. The
Yeah.
link to get to the voting page is also non-existent on the SU site anymore. Like you can't navigate from the homepage to the voting page without knowing the direct link.
Okay, well, I can definitely ask Megan to make sure that that is still up there. Okay. Should not have been taken down, but thank you for letting me know, and we can just double check to make sure that that is not the case. Yeah, okay, perfect. Okay, if there's no other new business or announcements, then can I have a motion on the table to adjourn the meeting? Motion by Director Del Giudice, seconded by Director Shandok. Would you like to speak to your motion? Any discussion on the matter? As I see none, all those in favor, Director Bothwell,
Approve.
Director Shandok,
I approve.
Director Del Giudice,
I approve.
Director McCarthy,
I approve.
Director Symington,
I approve.
Director Vale,
I approve.
and Vice Chair Sneedy.
I approve.
The motion passes unanimous consent. Thank you so much, everyone, and have a wonderful evening. And let's just get together and put boots on the ground to reach quorum.